So my name is Christopher Barnum-Dann, with a hyphen, and the name of my restaurant is Localis.
Okay, thank you. Are you originally from Forest Hill, California, sir?
I was born in Carmichael, and then my family moved to Forest Hill very early on, and I lived the majority of my life there.
And what's going on there? Like my fiance and I have looked at homes in Auburn before, but what's going on
Forest
there?
Hill is a very tiny mountain community. There's only one road in and out.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's also, I think there's one, maybe two restaurants up there now that have been gone. But there's not a whole lot up there for, life, entertainment as far as, outside of nature, which I hated as a child.
Yeah.
I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. And as I got older, then it was like, wow, I want to go back there. If it wasn't so secluded and far away, I'd move back up there. But there's just a lot of natural beauty up there. It's really neat to be able to run out of your house and be, in the middle of the woods. So.
Right.
But not a whole lot as far as the happenings up in Forest Hill.
Yeah. And why were you in Forest Hill? What was your parents' gig growing up?
They are always been country folk. They never really wanted to live anywhere in a city. And when they got the opportunity to buy a house with the help of my grandparents, because we grew up really, I don't like saying poor because I think that makes it seem like we didn't have food to eat. But we were very, very lower class as far as like money goes, finances. So that was really affordable up there because at that time there was, no desire for people to live up there.
Right.
Now there's more and more people that want to live outside of, the grid. But yeah, I think they just, my dad worked in Auburn. He just retired this year actually, but he always worked in Auburn and they didn't want to live in the town of Auburn. I almost said city, but it's not a city yet.
Yeah.
And my mom she just went wherever my dad had a job because she was always kind of in between jobs. She's solidified, her career now, but back then, it was just kind of dad wanted to live out in the country and that's where we lived.
Yeah. And what was your dad's gig?
He was a garbage man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I always thought like, ew, gross, a garbage man. And then throughout my life, it was crazy the things he would bring home. I mean, brand new stuff. People throw away the craziest stuff.
Yeah.
So as kids, I remember we never had a nice TV or anything like that. We always had like a turn dial, really old. And one day he just came home with like this brand new TV and brand new surround sound system and all this stuff in boxes.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, I guess this lady found her husband cheating and threw all of his stuff out and I just picked it up. And I'm like, wow. So like that was the first time we ever had like a really nice TV, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, he's always been like the hardest worker. He never stopped. Ever. So yeah, being a garbage man and driving, he drove big trucks before that. So that's kind of what he did. He wasn't necessarily like picking up your cans on the side of the street.
Right.
Not that he didn't do that, but more so he was driving the semi trucks back and forth and all that kind of stuff. So.
And I got a sense from past interviews, even though you were a poor kid, you weren't eating microwave dinners.
No, my mom used a microwave, but she knew how to cook.
Yeah.
Her biscuits are delicious. Her fried chicken is amazing. She made German egg pancakes for my brother and I from her, family's recipe. That was always one of my favorite things growing up. So yeah, she definitely knew how to cook. She knew how to season things. Things always tasted good at my mom's house. And I noticed when I went to other kids' house, things were bland, and I'm like,
yeah,
mashed potatoes. My mom makes great mashed potatoes. So it's like one of those where you get used to something that tasty and then you go somewhere else and someone's mom is like, doesn't know how to use salt. And you're like, this does not taste like my mom's food. So yeah. And we, they were really good about like, we didn't eat watermelon and all that stuff in the middle of winter. Sometimes tomatoes for tacos because my mom made a lot of tacos, which I still love to this day.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was my dad raised pigs throughout our whole lives and other animals, so it was kind of we kind of had, and plus living in Forest Hill, I hunt and fished my whole life, so we always had like a very healthy respect for food, and when we went backpacking or hunting or fishing or whatever, Pop's always instilled in us, that I still have to this day have never littered. I can't do it. It's something that's been ingrained in me since the very beginning. So yeah, we just always had a very healthy respect for earth and for food. And when we got to eat the good stuff, it was really good. So.
See, as a kid, my mom was a pretty good cook as well, but I rebelled. I was angry that I didn't get frozen pizza and SpaghettiOs like all the other kids. So you didn't have any interest in any of that junk food?
No, I mean, well, I guess with like like I said, we ate everything pretty much generic.
Yeah,
like, we didn't have real Oreos. We had whatever they call fake Oreos, So of course, we like that stuff. I to this day, ice cream is my favorite food on earth.
Yeah.
So, whenever ice cream was always something I was really stoked about when we had in the house. But yeah, I mean, we ate real meals. My mom never did like frozen microwave dinners or anything like that.
Yeah.
And she would use like jarred or canned sauces for her spaghetti, but she would make it, she would like brown the meats and all that kind of stuff. So it was always good food. And I think growing up, my brother and I mean, my sister too, she's a little bit younger. We would just love like summer and fall times when we had apple tree, we had plum trees, we had cherry trees, almond trees, all on this little piece of property. And I remember, every summer just like making ourselves sick, eating plums and all this good stuff. So I think because of my parents and my dad knowing kind of what grew around what times, I always kind of just preferred to eat fresher, foods like that. But yeah, we never really had that. My mom never did frozen pizza. So it was just one of those things where I think when you don't eat it, you don't care. And up in Forest Hill, it's not like there's thousands of kids that I'm around in an urban community.
Yeah.
These are all like, country bumpkin kids, so all of us were kind of eating the same stuff.
And where is your mom originally from? Some of the dishes that you labeled in the early stages, it sounded like she was Southern.
Yeah, I think she's definitely not Southern. I know that part of my family grew up in Missouri.
Yeah.
My mom grew up in Mount Shasta, California.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say I love Southern food. I think it's just the fried chicken, potatoes, biscuits. Like that's what my mom was really good at cooking. So I think that's kind of just why I go back towards that style. And plus, like some of my time spent in Southern America, down in Louisiana and all those other places kind of sparked my interest towards that food, which is why sometimes I do dishes, with a Southern flair. So.
So no interest in being a truck driver growing up?
No. Nope. My whole life I wanted to be a musician.
Yeah.
That was it. I started playing guitar when I was like 5 or 6 years old. My parents always had music playing in the house.
Yeah.
I mean, there was never a time where we didn't have music playing. So from that point on, my mom was an incredible guitarist and singer. And by incredible, I don't mean like she was like shredding solos. I mean, she was just a really well balanced acoustic player with a beautiful voice. And her two sisters always, when we got together, would sing because they were a tenor, a bass, and an alto.
Yeah,
they had the spectrum of the three, and they just sang like so beautifully. So I kind of always grew up with music, and I was always interested in music, and that's kind of what I always wanted to do. I didn't really have. As a child, I don't ever remember being like, hey, I want to, be a doctor or a this or a that. Like, I just wanted to be a musician. And the second that I think middle school is kind of where I really started playing like in a band, with my electric guitar. And that was kind of it for me. That's all I wanted to do. So.
Who was some examples growing up that it was in your mind that you could do something like that? Like, I'm a small town kid from Kansas, and the idea of rock stars is like L.A., Nashville, Chicago, New York.
And see, I don't think I knew anything about any of those cities at all. I didn't know anything about the culture of music. I just wanted out of Forest Hill. I just wanted out of the tiny little town where there wasn't like... I had never been to a big city. My parents never took us to like San Francisco or anything like that. I mean, we went to Disneyland, once when I was a bit older. But other than that, like we really didn't ever venture out. Like Auburn was a city to us.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have those aspirations to go to a specific city. I kind of just wanted out of the tiny little town that I was in. And like I said, when you're young and you're rebelling against it, and then when you get older, you realize that's where you want to go. That's where you want to be. You know, I wish I would have spent less time being angry at my parents for like wanting to camp and fish all the time, and been more like involved in that, because I spent the whole time just like whining to myself and, you know, being a little whatever you want to call it.
But where does music come from if it's not from angst? You got to be mad at someone, right?
Well, I don't think so, because for me it was just harmonies. I know that in my head I have a perfect pitch, which doesn't mean that I can sing perfectly or anything, but I definitely hear off notes. So my parents growing up listening to all sorts of like, you know, Elton John, Cat Stevens, Bread, which is one of my favorite bands of all time that no one ever even knows exists, but amazing band. I just remember singing, you know, my mom and me. I have a good voice. My brother and sister can't sing to save their lives. But we would just be like tearing it up and just singing all these songs. And, I just loved music. It didn't even, the anger part, I don't really think ever, because, you know, throughout the years, I ended up playing a lot of death metal.
Yeah.
And that wasn't about anger. It was about, I've still to this day never tried drugs. And I remember the very first time that I played a death metal show and the mosh pit happened and people were just like going crazy. And I felt like I was on something. It was like, holy crap, you know, this is amazing. So, I mean, to answer your question, I guess in the beginning, it wasn't anger at all. It was just listening to this beautiful music and really just being like, man, I want to do something like that. You know, my parents were strict, but not like, you know, religious strict. So I could listen to some music and then some music I couldn't.
Right.
And at the time I was growing up, like MC Hammer and all that stuff was coming out. And I really didn't have any interest in that. I was listening to like bands, musicians, you know, stuff like that. So it was a much different thing. I think later on, wanting to get out of town and wanting to not be part of that tiny town mentality anymore was what was at least in the anger-ish kind of area where I was like, man, this is lame. I'm going to play metal and piss my parents off, because they were definitely not into any sort of metal.
Yeah.
So,
So when you walk out of those high school doors for the last time, how is your plan? What is your plan to be an artist?
high school.
Yeah.
Well, I moved out of my house when I was 17 and moved in with my bandmates.
Yeah.
To finish junior year in high school. So my senior year in high school, I had my own place, which was pretty insane as a high schooler. At that point in time, I was already working in construction. I was making good money, and I was like, man, I guess I can do this, you know, like, so at that point in time, like when I started I did graduate with high honors as kind of like a FU to my parents.
Right.
I sent them the report card with a 3.9, and I was like, I just did this without, you know, living at home. So obviously I was a little angry. But after high school, it was just, I was already working. So it was just, I didn't really have time to think of, I was definitely very into the band at that time. I had started a band and had continued playing with it for a couple of years. So at that point, the dream was to be, you know, a death metal musician, which at that time I had no idea that it's harder to be a death metal musician that makes money than it is to be a famous rock star.
Right.
You know, it just doesn't happen. You know, there's very few bands that can make a career out of playing death metal. And that was even, you know, more so in the heyday, you know, of when that was happening. So high school was kind of just like end and go to work.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what I did, you know, and I was working construction. I remember the day that I was doing electrical for the first time, and I wired up a light, and then I was able to flip a switch on, and the light turned on, and I was like, holy shit, I just made light, you know, like, and that was kind of it. And I really enjoyed electrical for a good amount of years after that. So,
So when things break around here, are you the guy that fixes?
I do everything here.
Yeah.
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 If I can't fix it, I'm definitely one of those people that if I don't know, I won't mess with it. Like AC stuff, I can't mess with that. I don't know. But when it comes to, I mean, I wired everything in this building that's ever been broke. Anytime we do remodels, I do it all myself. It's definitely a way to save a ton of money. You know, same at my house too. Like I do everything at the house. So,
Well, it sounds like if you want to be an independent restaurant owner, that should be the path then, instead of culinary school right away. 2 years.
Oh
of
yeah,
job.
I'm very fortunate that I did that early on. That I did construction and that I was good at it. Because I ran my own electrical business for a while, and I was very successful as an electrician working for other businesses. And past electrical, I mean, I did framing. I got involved in plumbing. I got involved in. I'm very, very knowledge hungry. I always want to learn something new. So when I was in construction, I would be like, "Hey, plumber, I'm off tomorrow and the next day. Let me come help you do this." And I learned how to plumb, and then I learned how to do sheetrock, and I learned how to frame. And when you're in the industry of construction, you see everything, so you pick up a lot.
Right.
So yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to do that because it has saved me. I mean, at this point, I'm guessing tens of thousands of dollars at a minimum, at home and at businesses where I'm just like, "Hey, I can fix that. Hey, I can fix that." And my brother and I have always been very, very into fixing things. We were always tinkerers. My dad had a really awesome shop growing up, and he fixed everything that in the house, everything.
Yeah.
So we kind of learned from him too. And I think if more people did that, they could save a lot of money and they wouldn't get taken advantage of. Because I've worked with some people now where I've been able to see, that someone is trying to take advantage of them and trying to charge them way more than they should for a project. So yeah, it's been good to have that background.
Well, in my mind, when I read about you, it sounded like when you decided to take the culinary path, you were touring with your band, you were doing electrical work at the time, but it sounded like you hit a financial wall. But what you're telling me is you were a successful electrician. So what was the wall that you hit? That was like, because I know you could have gone on that path, right? I know plenty of successful electricians. Oh, yeah. That'll probably make more money in their lifetime than a restaurant ever will, right?
Oh, for sure,
yeah. So,
I mean, it was never the financials that I hit a wall against when it comes to when I was touring and when I stopped and became a chef. I had stopped doing electrical a couple of years before that.
Yeah.
I had plenty of money saved up. I wish I would have been smarter back then because I made, a lot of money. And I should have saved it, but instead I was taking trips and buying god-awful amounts of equipment and merch for the band and paying for tour vans and paying for tours. And I just spent all my money for years dumping it back into the band, trying to make it a success. And when I cut the knuckle out of my hand with a skill saw, and that was kind of the end of the construction era for me. I just wasn't interested anymore at all. It wasn't the work that I didn't like because I really still enjoy doing electrical.
Yeah.
It was the dealing with, the homeowners or the business owners, I just didn't enjoy it anymore at all. And I just kind of fell off. And that was kind of the first time in my life that I realized who I am as a person, that I just don't care about money at all. I want to do something that I'm excited about. And the second that I'm not excited about, I'll quit. So for me, it was quit being an electrician, finding other ways to make money while I was still being a musician. And then I came home from a very long tour, and my wife, my girlfriend at the time, who was watching my daughter while I was gone, was kind of like, "Listen, I'm watching your kid. I'm taking care of the house. I'm doing everything. And you're out, being a musician, but you're also not like being able to provide at the time." And I was paying all of our bills with the other jobs that I was doing, but it was just like necessity work. I was just working when I had to pay rent or to pay this or to pay that. And that was the point where I stopped, and kind of had the realization that I wasn't going to be a rock star. I wasn't going to be, a musician that could do that for a career. So I had to make a change at that point.
And before we get to the culinary path, your band's name was Dismal Lapse?
Yeah, so it started out as Bled, B-L-E-D. We carried that moniker for like 6 years.
Yeah.
Then a band called The Bled came out, and they were like a screamo band that got signed to a big record label. And the record label hit us up and was just like, "Hey, change your name or we're going to sue you." And at that point in time, like we're like just out of high school, death metal band with no money extra, and they had tons of money, and there was no way we were going to fight, in court to keep our name.
Yeah.
So at that point, we had to change the name of the band.
And I know this is probably attractive to the death metal sector, but you realize the band's name literally translates to depressing time.
Yes. Right? Yeah, that was the whole thing, I've always considered myself a wordsmith. Not that I'm good at it, but, like in my mind, I always loved poetry. I always loved words and their meanings behind them. So when I was looking for a name that meant something dark and, that is exactly what it was a dismal time. It was a bad time. So,
okay.
So
you're touring with depressing time.
Yes, I am. With Dismal Laughs. Different bandmates throughout the times. We hit some pretty long periods of time where we had the same members, but I was always the guy. I wrote the music on guitar, and then right before we had changed from Bled to Dismal Laughs, I had taken over drums because we couldn't find a drummer. I mean, I was living in Auburn, and there wasn't very many bands, and the 2 or 3 bands that were around that were well known were kind of established and didn't really want to do, someone else's music. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I'll learn how to drum. I had played guitar for 20 plus years at that time.
Yeah.
I had gone to lessons. I practiced all the time, and I still was like, okay. Mm-hmm. I could play guitar. I could play, riffs like no problem. Soloing was pretty much something that I kind of just winged, and I had a good ear, so I could make things that sounded good, but I just never really was a great guitarist ever.
Yeah.
I sat down on a drum kit, and it was totally second nature to me. Mm-hmm. I just felt so at one with drums. And that doesn't mean that I'm like this amazing drummer,
right.
But it definitely was much easier to play drums than it was to play guitar for me. And I had always done the vocals, so I just kind of, when I was learning how to play drums, I was doing the vocals anyways. I already knew all of the lines. So I just continued doing vocals and became drummer vocalist of Dismal Laughs.
Mm-hmm. And I read a review of your last album, I think. And I think it was 9 years later. So it was published in September of last year.
Yeah.
And he said you all were 9 years too early. If you came out now, that you would be more popular than ever with that community.
Yeah.
Is that something that you thought about?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't go back now. I love cooking so much. I love it more than I love music, and I can make a lot more money doing it. But in general terms, yeah, I was always pushing that technical side of things. I always wanted to be more technical. And back then it was a lot about like just being really aggressive and being, like talking about mutilation of bodies and, all that kind of stuff, like mm-hmm. Cannibal Corpse, and Deicide was all about like hating God and hating Jesus. And I was never interested in any of that at all. It just didn't appeal to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would write lyrics that seemed like they were gory, but really they were about something completely different. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to play into those, things to get us in there. But we were always the odd man out on shows, and not that we didn't get success, because we did. People really liked our albums. We sold over 2,000 copies of, our last release, which is a small number, but for a very small little death metal band, that's actually pretty good. We got to tour a bunch of cool places, got to play with some really big bands. So I look back on it and I'm excited about what we did, but I definitely agree that we were doing music that was a little bit beyond, and I don't mean, I got to be really careful with what I say because I don't want to sound egotistical, because it wasn't that it was better than the music that was going on at the time. Yeah. It was just very different. Mm-hmm. Like I was striving for something that nowadays is much more accepted. So
okay. So did you learn anything marketing-wise from the music business? So you sold 2,000 albums that you kind of instituted in this place now?
Well, I think it's just my hustle.
Yeah.
I think that's always been something. My dad like I told you earlier, was one of the hardest working men that I'd ever seen. I mean, he never stopped working. If he wasn't at work, he was at home working. And my brother and I we had a good childhood, so I want to make sure that I always say that, because, they took care of us. There was hard times, and they always took care of us. But my brother and I worked. And I'm not talking about like some chores. We worked. Wood cutting was something every summer my brother and I just dreaded because we couldn't go to our friend's house. Friends couldn't come over because we were working. Before the sun was up, we were on the road. After the sun was down, we were coming in and eating dinner, taking a shower, and going to sleep, because we had to get up the next day and do it. So I just always hustled. And I think that when you have that drive and that intensity to constantly try to get better at something, you're always going to push yourself. You're always going to push yourself. So when it came to the music, I spent the time and I reached out to every single person that I knew in any area that we were going to play. Come see us play, we'll get you in for free, or, come see us play, I'll give you a shirt, or come see this, or come see that. And I was excited about the product we were selling. So it's very easy to sell something that you're very, into.
Yeah.
So I think that same dynamic comes into the restaurant. I'm really excited about what we're doing here. I feel very strongly that we're producing, a very top tier product here. So I'm going to try to sell it because, a hustler never stops. It's always got to try to be, selling more and getting more exposure. And it's not even about the money. It's just about you want to play in front of as many people as possible.
Yeah.
And one thing I can tell you, maybe not necessarily marketing or something, but when we played New York the first time, we played for 3 people or 4 people. And the other bands on that tour were I can cuss, right?
Yeah.
They were like, fuck this. We're not even going to play. One band didn't even play. Other band didn't even bring out their equipment. They asked if they could play on someone else's equipment because there was nobody there. And we just said, you know what? There's 4 people here. So we're going to turn these 4 people into fans. And that was always it was bummer when you roll up to a show and there's not very many people there.
Yeah.
But it was like, hey, if there's anybody there, it's time to put a show on. It's time to get this done. So we decided to just play our hearts out. And the next time we played New York, there was a really good crowd for us. And those people that were there were they told all their friends. So I think that mentality has always stayed with me to where it doesn't matter if you're playing for 1 or 1,000, you got to put on a good show. Otherwise, they're never going to want to see you again. And I think it's the same in the restaurant. If we're having a really slow night and there's not a whole lot of people in here, opportunity to just say, whatever, whatever, we're not going to, we don't care, just put the food out. Or there's an opportunity to say hey, there's only 4 people in the restaurant, which means we can spend the most amount of time that we possibly can giving them the best experiences, as we can. So I think it's just always that mentality of it doesn't matter. 1 or 1,000, you're going to play your heart out. You're going to give the best show that you can, the best performance. And hopefully people resonate with that.
Favorite food city on your tour?
Favorite food city on my tour, hands down, Nolens. That was keep in mind, this is Forest Hill kid. There was no ethnic food of any kind.
Yeah.
I did not know Chinese food, Thai food, any of that stuff. I had no idea that existed. So for me, the first time that I ate red beans and rice, catfish, and I remember that we were at a gas station and there was a dude that we could barely understand. He was so Creole, just down home Creole. And I was like, hey man, we got a night off. Where do we eat? And I don't want to eat at this fancy place. I want to eat at the place where you go to eat. And he was just told me about this spot, and I can't even remember the name of it, which I feel terrible because at that point in time there really wasn't there was internet, but it wasn't huge yet. Right. It wasn't we were snapping pictures of all sorts of stuff and posting it. So it was kind of a crazy thing. And we ended up eating at this little spot, and I just was fucking blown away by the food. Yeah. I'm holy shit. I've never had any food like this before. And that town, then after that, we played in the city, in the heart of the city. So of course I had to have a beignet, and I had to have this, and I had to have that. And by the end of that couple of days that we spent there, I was just I was so pumped on food. I was holy crap, this is so awesome. This food is amazing. Second favorite city I got to mention was Miami. We went into Little Cuba, and we had Cubanos, and we had, ceviche with plantain chips. And I was just, that's the tour. And I came home and I was like, I can't be a musician. I got to be a chef. That's it.
And I know this, but my listeners don't yet. But you do tour like 15 Michelin restaurants at some point in your culinary career. So do those outweigh those moments on the road with that home food?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah, because just the camaraderie. I mean, my guitarist and I got in a fist fight on the side of the road one day. We just like pull over the fucking van. We're going to go to blows, like. So it was so stressful, but, it's like the kitchen, you're in this tiny little space for, way too many hours, and it's just hard and it's intense and it's brutal. But, when you're playing a packed show and you have a good night and everything's on, the energy, the charisma, just everything, afterwards, drinking with the bands and smoking and just partying and just having a good time. I mean, who doesn't want to just like live on an endless party? You know what I mean? For a while, at least. It gets burning, but it was, those times to me will never, I'm so happy that I did them in my life, because I can look back now and say, I did that. I did that. I think too many people look back and say, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. So for me, it was, the culinary trip that I did, and all that stuff was like something that changed my life. It was, crucially important to, who I am as a chef, but touring around as a death metal musician with, friends, and it's something that's always going to be one of the greatest memories of my life.
When I talk to you fine dining folks, they always label these small ma and pa establishments that were their favorites, right? So why don't you fine dining folks try to do that instead of fine dining, right? Like, I've talked to many chefs that talk about, I like cooking the food that I do, but what I really like is this X hole in the wall.
Yeah.
What do you think is?
I think I'm a very different chef.
Yeah.
I don't fall into that category.
Yeah.
I love all food. I love every single kind of food out there, just like I love every single kind of music that's out there. And when people say that, when you ask them what they listen to, and they say everything, but then they have a huge list of things that they don't listen to.
Yeah.
I see music and food as the same way. There is no different genres of music. It's just good or bad, period. I love fine dining. I love to eat fine dining. I love the service of fine dining. My favorite foods, memories, some are very small, ma and pa. Some are the top restaurants in the world. I don't just want to do that. I want to do fine dining because ma and pa is great, and you can get really successful and make a lot of money, and be very happy with what you do. But for me, the art always has to be part of it. And you can't do artfully prepared ma and pa food. It's just, that's not what that dynamic is. That dynamic is about going in, they know your name, they know what you like. They know that they got to add a little bit of chili oil to this because you like it spicy, and you just get to sit there very comfortably in flip-flops and a t-shirt and eat delicious food, right? That's a great thing. And we need that. We need those places.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want to go where people are working at the very, very pinnacle of what, food is as far as restaurants go right now. And the people that are working in those places are at the top of their game. They're using the very best ingredients. I mean, it's the Olympics of dining, when you're talking about the people that are at the very, very top of what they're doing. So that to me is always something that I'm going to strive after. I have Michelin goals. I want to be a Michelin chef. I've worked in those kitchens. A lot of people are like, oh, you don't want that. You don't know what it's like. Of course, I know what it's like. I've worked in those kitchens. I want to be that. That's something, because I like the intensity. I like the drive. I like the passion that you have to have in order to make it to that level. So yeah, I mean, when I think about like, oh man, what do I want to eat every night? I'm not that guy where I'm like, oh man, like last night my family went out and had wood-fired pizza from a buddy that opened a place, and it was delicious, and I had a great time eating it, and it was like, damn, that's really good. I never want to open a pizza place though. Yeah. It's not something I'm into, like how fancy can you make a pizza, in this era? I mean, maybe if I'm in New York, I can do, truffle, foie gras, whatever, blah, 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 but those ingredients aren't what I'm passionate about either, So for me, it's hand in hand. There's plenty of times where I look at my wife and I'm like, let's leave the kids home and go eat at Carpe Vino in Auburn, which is a fine dining restaurant, because his flavors are delicious. His presentation is beautiful. The service is really good. I love dining out, and that's where we spend our money. So.
Can you do Michelin here?
I sure as hell hope so, man. I really do. My goal is to have a Michelin star before I'm 40, so that leaves me 5 years. I think I'm on a good path, a good trajectory. I hope I don't have to move away to get that. I think that Sacramento absolutely deserves to be at the top of the food game in the world, not necessarily because we have the best restaurants in the world yet, but because everywhere that has Michelin stars orders their produce from our area. I mean, we grow more than anyone else in the world grows. Provençal, France, and maybe like the Basque region in Spain are both, serious Michelin areas because of the produce that they can get from the area and because of their long growing cycles throughout the year. We have that here. So it's like, if Chicago is ordering their fruit and their vegetables from California and Las Vegas is ordering their stuff from there, I mean, New York has a pretty thriving culture as well in upper state New York for agriculture and New Jersey and everything. But we should have more restaurants that are at that level because we don't have to have things shipped to us. We can have them right here in Sacramento. So my goal with this restaurant isn't necessarily just to achieve my personal goals of what I want. I want to see Sacramento come up together because no matter how well I do, if the whole city doesn't come up together, then it doesn't matter. We have to get the city to lift up and be what I think its potential is. And in that case, I get to come up with it. So the focus is really about Sacramento becoming Michelin, not me becoming Michelin.
In your mind, so you have 5 years to do it. What does that look like?
Well, it's scary to talk about because I don't want people to freak out, that I'm going to plan to do this one day. But I think it eventually goes to having Localis be tasting menu only. At that point, I would definitely want to open up a second restaurant that's more of a regular menu concept, a little bit more low key. But it's really, really hard in this tiny little space in Sacramento to do a full regular menu and the tasting menu every night. It's really hard. You can't get Michelin star without a tasting menu of some sort. So, over the next 5 years, hopefully over the next couple of years, we can transition into tasting menu only. And then beyond that, I guess it's just trying to support other restaurants that are doing great things because it doesn't matter how good we get. Michelin doesn't just go to a city that has one great restaurant and say, hey, we're going to give you a Michelin star because you have this one great restaurant. You have to have a ton of really great restaurants that are working at that level in order to bring, that sort of attraction to Sacramento. And we have some great restaurants. I'm not saying that. We have a ton of great restaurants, but I don't think we have as many as we need of the level of restaurants in Sacramento yet that's going to bring Michelin here.
And you need that other small restaurant because I've been told there's not a lot of money in tasting menus. Is that how the business game works?
I think that's false. Yeah.
Oh, really?
I've always looked. I'm always been against the grain when it comes to business and when it comes to food. I think that what happens with fine dining restaurants that go under or that have very small profit margins is number one, they're using the most expensive ingredients, right? And don't get me wrong, our ingredients are more expensive than most restaurants use in Sacramento here. But at the same time, not every tasting menu is full of filet mignon, foie gras, caviar, this, that. And I think when you're using those super expensive ingredients, you have to charge a ton of money to make it work, right? The other thing is the amount of heads in a kitchen. I mean, most Michelin star restaurants have massive staff. I mean, just insanely massive for the amount of seats that they have. And when you're running that sort of labor cost, your bottom line is going to shrink to nothing. And then, of course, if you're in a Michelin area, those are all extremely expensive, rent. If you're in San Francisco, you're going to pay 2 or 3 times a square foot than we are here in Sacramento. I think that me working as a chef saves us a ton of money. I would say that we make far more money doing our tasting menus than we do our standard menus.
And that's ridiculous because I think you're the second most cheap tasting menu in terms of overall price, if I recall correctly. The only one that beats you is Mother, and I don't know how they make any money. They do 10 at 40, and you do 10 at, what was it again, 85, 90?
79.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mother is awesome, and I love what they do. But I will say, a vegetarian tasting menu where you can, the techniques are definitely there for them. They're, fantastic chefs. Michael Tiemann is a great chef.
Yeah.
Well deserving of all the success that he's had. But I think just the cost of goods alone makes it much easier for them to charge a much lower percentage.
Yeah.
And then also too, like if, manufacturing proteins and all of the things that go into that tasting menu that we do here is much more labor intensive than his is. So I think he's able to get away with that. And I don't know his finances. I don't know if he's making money on that or if it's just something to get people in the door.
Well, I was worried about both of you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. For us here, we're doing extremely well.
Yeah.
And I say that not to say that we're, packed every single night and we don't have any seats, but we're doing well. The numbers work. Obviously, we're still here and I haven't used any money I haven't taken any loans or, borrowed any money or anything like that. It's all just been the restaurant. And we're making it, so I think what I look at when I say, how are we making it and how are other restaurants not making it? I think number one, I've always tried to price myself to be extremely aggressive. I'm not just going to say, hey, we're going to charge, $180 for this, or we're going to do this. I think about, okay, well, what does this piece of meat cost me to put on the plate? Just say it's $7. That's fine. Okay. So $7, which means, just for the protein, I got to charge at least $21 to make my 30% food cost, which is still high. Then I have, farro and I have radish and I have this and I have that, blah, 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 blah. So the final cost of my dish is going to be $8.50. Well, statistics say that you're going to need to price that, in our area, at a 30% food cost. So you're looking at, somewhere around, $26, $27, something like that. So that's what we price it at. We've been told that we're expensive before, and I kind of just laugh because we're literally charging the bare minimum that we can for the ingredients and the time that we're putting in. So I look at other restaurants, I look at their menus. There are a couple of other places in town that serve, higher end food, kind of like we do on our standard menu. And I think that we're cheaper than all of them, But once again, I look at how small we are. We're not a huge restaurant. I'm the owner and the executive chef, and I'm on the line every single day. I took last night off after 6 o'clock. It was slow. And I said, I'm going home because I just worked, like 50 something hours in 3 days. So, but usually I'm here on the line, which means that I'm saving an entire labor for that night, an entire piece of labor for the night. So as long as I'm here early, prepping, doing all the projects, breaking down the fish, breaking down the meats, doing all that stuff that takes time, we're going to be able to make money.
Do you think you're doing Michelin quality food now, or do you have to be like David Chang and lock yourself up in a basement in New York, or be like Brock and lock yourself up into a bourbon bin, or be like other chefs and smoke some ayahuasca in the desert and figure out your flavor profile? So.
No, you know what? I think like when I talked about drumming and how I felt natural, I feel like cooking for me is something that's just in my bones. I really feel that. I haven't been cooking very long. To be where I'm at for the amount of time I've been cooking, I think is pretty rare. So I think that on some nights and on some dishes, we definitely serve that level of cuisine. I think that our techniques are still growing. I never stop learning. I'm still going to be staging at places. I staged right before I opened this place at a Michelin restaurant because I wanted to just put myself in that area again and say, like, can I do this? Am I at this level, I would say that not every dish we put out right now is Michelin level. But when we have the opportunity to spend the time and dedicate, a good amount of work to a dish, that we can absolutely be at that level. Our tasting menus, I think they're up there. I really do. I've been, as you know, I've been to over 30 Michelin restaurants now, 3s, 2s, and 1 stars. So I think I have a pretty good grasp on what's out there at what level. And yeah, I think that there are plenty of times that we hit that mark. I also think that there's plenty of times that we're hitting, a very good mark. I think the step between Michelin and really good is huge, massive. I think it's much bigger than most people think. It's not just like an overnight thing, like, you know what, we're going to go Michelin and just go for it. You have to work at that for years, to make that happen. And I think we're in a progression. We're growing, but I do think that there's a good amount of times, yes, that we are at a 1-star Michelin level for food.
Mm-hmm. And in order to create that time, I guess the way that you're going to do that is go full tasting menu.
Yeah. Once I can dedicate all of the time to a much smaller amount of work, quality gets to go up. So really it's not about, I'm not going to make millions at Localis no matter what I do. It's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
It's a tiny restaurant. And it's going to hopefully one day give my family and I a decent lifestyle. But as far as, going tasting menu only, it's not about anything with money, trying to make more. I will say that once you go tasting menu only, you now have stagnant numbers, which is good in a restaurant. The variables are what kills you. You go really slow one day. You don't know how many people to prepare for. You run out of things. You have too many of things. Once you go tasting menu only, and pretty much at that point, your reservations only, you know exactly how many people you're feeding. So you can staff down, you can staff up, you can buy more, you can buy less. You can really, really hone in on your numbers and know what you're going to be making every day. And that to me is the point where I'm going to have some consistency in the restaurant. And that's what I'm striving for. And it's about feeding people. It's about feeding Sacramento. And I think that I can do the very best that I can do if we go tasting menu only. That being said, that might not ever work. Yeah. It's not like I'm saying that is going to happen, period. I don't care. If in the next couple of years we don't see the amount of tasting menus to regular menus go up in ratio, it'll just have to be Localis, and I'm totally cool with that.
Well, and you've already made concessions to the public, right, with things like the burger or the happy hour menu, et cetera. That's not necessarily your food.
No, I think that has to be worded carefully because it is my food. You know what I mean? Like, I love a good burger. Okay. I love good pizza. I love chicken. I love all these things, that we're not, super well known for. And I think that, to kind of point to that directly is look at what's been written about our burger. Yeah. Look what's been written about our fried chicken. Like the simple things that we do here get just as much press as the tasting menu and the fine dining aspect of it, because we put the same amount of love into every dish that we do. Just because we're not, feeding you a tasting menu and you're going to buy a burger doesn't mean that we're going to say, oh, he's just buying a burger, so just, put out whatever. No, we're going to grind this burger in house. When we can, we're going to make the buns in house. We're going to make every single aspect of that burger delicious and awesome so that when you eat it, you're like, holy shit. Like, this is a fine dining place and I just had a burger for $13 and it was freaking amazing. Awesome. I want to come back and try the tasting menu now. I think it's a great segue. And I think for where we're at in Sacramento right now, you have to do that. You have to show people like, hey, you don't have to spend $80. Right. You don't have to spend $50. You can come in and spend less than $20 and get a glass of wine and a beer or a burger and enjoy yourself and have something that's really delicious. And for me, that's something I never want to lose track of,
Well, it's the gateway to creating trust, right? If the burger is good, then this $79 tasting menu is going to be phenomenal, right?
Done. Yeah, exactly. And that's our tagline, trust us to feed you well. And that's what it is, no matter what we do, no matter what we're serving, we're going to put a good amount of love into it. We're going to try our best to make it the best possible, whatever it is. And yeah, it's a great segue. And it's no mystery, like local hours for our local community here. Like there's a lot of people that live right around us that aren't going to be able to come in and do a tasting menu or don't want to because it's just too much money. And we understand that, so we did local hours specifically for our local neighborhood. We did brunch for the local neighborhood. We did those things because we wanted to, show them not only can we do a Michelin Star, experience for you here, we can also do a very comfortable and relaxed local hour where you don't feel like there's any pressure to spend any money. You're just having a good time. We're going to talk to you the same. We're going to joke with you the same. We just want you to have a really good time. I mean, I didn't open a restaurant to make money. Everyone knows that. I mean, it's not like unless you have an empire, you're never going to make, crazy money. I did this because I freaking love feeding people and I love food and I just want to hang out with a bunch of cool people and have them enjoy, their meal here.
I recently listened to an interview with Sean Brock who said ingredients have 5 minutes. So once they're done cooking, they have 5 minutes that they're going to shine. And with running the small plates and the large plates and then the tasting menu at the same time, how much do you think about time when you're working?
Because we're so small, there's no area for anything to sit.
Yeah.
So nothing sits longer than 5 minutes. That's the kind of nice thing about a very small restaurant. There's nowhere that I can set a dish in a warmer and have it sit for, however long until it gets served. It's like when it's out, I'm sure you saw the pass on the way in. It's like 3 feet wide.
Right.
That's the only place we have to put up dishes. So when they go up, it's like, get them the hell out of here now, because we don't have room. There's the next set of dishes coming up after it. But I would agree, that things have got to be really fresh. And I've had cooks in the past that kind of try to pre-cook things throughout service, and we just have to stop it real fast. Things have got to be cooked fresh. I mean, everything is better that close. Maybe except for pizza. Pizza's still really good the next day.
Yeah.
Certain things, I think. Of course, I'm the leftover king. I eat all leftovers in my house because I cannot waste food. It makes me nauseous, thinking about wasting food. But as far as ingredients go, I would agree. I would say that you cook that. That's why we don't love doing to-go food, because it's like, man, you're not going to get the experience that you're looking for.
Right.
That fish being, put into a container and steaming.
I can't imagine ordering to-go fish.
Well, I mean, don't get me. I just last week we had a huge Postmates order.
Yeah.
They had a steak, they had a fish, a cheese and charcuterie plate, a salad, and a risotto. And I was like, I'm going to put a risotto in a box and send it to somebody, and they're not going to love it. They're going to say that it's not that good. So I wrote on the top of their box that they're awesome for ordering, Postmates Localis, and I hope everything is good. And they reached out and said everything was great. So I guess it's to each their own too. For me, I'm obviously going to try to give you the very best possible rendition of a dish that I can. But that being said, if they love the food, then who am I? I don't care. That's the whole philosophy here. People, is there a dress code? Of course there's not a dress code. I'm not paying the bill. You are. You want to come in flip-flops and a t-shirt and spend, $500? You can do that here. No problem. You want to come in a business suit and spend $10? You can do that too. Or, any variation of that thereafter. Is just about food. So it's like, hey, if you want to order Postmates, we haven't got a tasting menu to go yet. I'm still waiting for that call. I don't think I would do it just because I know it wouldn't be anywhere near, what the experience would be. And I think that's important, that it's not just food, it's an experience. But yeah, it's I would agree. I think ingredients after they're cooked have an extremely short shelf life.
One thing that excites me about this concept, right? You have to work with the produce that's local and seasoned. But at some points, right, that requires creativity. And sometimes in my life, I just don't have the creative juice to work around it. So do you ever run into roadblocks?
Oh, of course. I think that anybody on earth, if they say they never hit a roadblock with creativity, is so full of shit. Yeah. I've done, at this point, thousands of different dishes. Not all of them are winners, obviously. But I think I'm extremely creative. And still, there's times where I'm like, I don't know what the fuck to do with this carbochi pepper. Yeah. We've fire roasted it. We've done this. We've done that. We've done this. We've done that. On and on and on. It's like, well, what the hell do we do with it, So, yeah, I think there's definitely times where I hit roadblocks. And, the whole local ingredients thing. Our whole restaurant is based on local ingredients. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's never a time where we're using not as many local ingredients as we are at another time. But that being said, not everything we use is local. We've never claimed that. We've never said we're 100% local. Because guess what? We wouldn't have pepper or any kind of seasonings pretty much. Any herbs maybe, but no coriander or no this or no that, because those aren't produced. Peppercorns are not grown locally. Coffee is not grown locally. Obviously, there's only one area, a band on earth, that coffee grows. Teas, on and on and on. Octopus. California doesn't have an octopus, purveyor yet that is like they have in Spain or like in Europe and Greece and everything, where they're producing, beautiful, octopus. I tried to use California octopus. It's huge. First off, it comes very intermittently, and we couldn't get the end result out of that we can with our Spanish octopus that we do here. So that was one of those things where I said, yeah, we're going to use the best product over using something local. That being said, I think local spans far beyond ingredients. We don't use a broadliner here, like Cisco or US Foods or any of that. We know that buying our paper goods from Scott Nakey is way more expensive than it is from Cisco, but we're willing to spend that extra amount of money to support a local business. I mean, he's been in town for like 50 years, so he is local. We buy all of our coffee from Chocolate Fish Coffee because they're local. You know, they're doing their business here. We buy everything that we can buy local, we do. And that does not just mean food. That means everything has to be local. You know, if we're going to use, we're not going to do ADT security system. You know, we're going to do Crime Alert because they're Sacramento based. So I think that the local thing and the local ingredients and creativity and all that, I think it spans beyond just the food and goes into every aspect of the business. How can we afford to use local everything, you know?
I want to talk about the history of this space a little bit. So when you approached Chris, or Chris approached you to pitch the concept of Localis, first they had Thule's Bistro in here, I think.
Yeah. Thule Bistro.
And then 2 failed restaurants. And people like to talk about cursed spaces all the time.
Yeah.
So did that run through your brain at all during the opening process?
Well, to be honest with you, I hadn't really saturated myself into Sacramento restaurant culture at all. So I didn't really know anything about Thule Bistro or the failed space. I will say that even that, you know, you were like, hey, there's Thule Bistro and then 2 failed restaurants and then Localis. There was only 1 failed restaurant in between Thule Bistro and Localis, which was Trick Pony Pizza. I think people have this weird thing about this place where they're like, oh, there was like 20 restaurants that closed, you know, like, but really there was just the 3. Adam Peckel opened Thule Bistro. He built the space out, and was very, very successful for a good amount of years. And then there was Trick Pony Pizza, which was just an absolute disaster, from the moment it opened. I mean, I don't mind saying this either at all, but the owners made statements about how there's no good pizza in Sacramento before they opened, and they were just not received very well. And I don't think they really knew what they were doing as far as like, if you're going to make a claim that you're going to make the best pizza around, you better understand that there's people out there that are dead serious about pizza.
Yeah.
You know, like they are dead serious. If you're not, the crust isn't perfect, if this isn't perfect, you're not making top tier pizza. So when Chris approached me, I never approached them. I never, you know, they found out about me through a mutual friend. They came up to the restaurant I was working at the time. They offered me a position opening up partnering supposedly with an Italian concept. I politely declined just because I had done Italian food. I'm never going to cook in a restaurant where I can only do one style of food. That's just so boring to me. So I ended up saying, no, thank you. And they said, well, you know, what do you want to do? And I pitched the concept of Localis. I had already had the name. I had already had the idea in my head for the past 7 years that I had been cooking, that I wanted to do a restaurant called Localis. And then they jumped on it, and we opened under Localis.
And, of course, Chris eventually leaves. And he says the kitchen is too small for 2 minds, which I think is a politically correct way of saying he didn't agree with the vision necessarily.
Yeah, I've been kind of waiting because I've always wanted to talk about this openly. Obviously, I only...
See, what Chris does is a burger restaurant, which means volume, right? Yeah. And this is a really small place.
Yes.
And that is the opposite of what
volume. Yeah, you can't do volume. I mean, you can. I shouldn't ever say in absolutes you can or can't do this or that. But what I can tell you is that there is absolutely a difference between doing a 100-seat restaurant and trying to do volume and doing a 50-seat restaurant and trying to do volume. Volume's not going to work out in a small space. That being said, I've worked in high-volume restaurants. That's not what I want to do with my life. I constantly have to go back and forth with people that are like, hey, man, you got to do this and that because that's what the business needs, or you got to do this and that because that's what Sacramento needs, or this or that because that's what these people want. I get tired of constantly everyone telling me that you have to do what makes other people happy. I think my mom told me from the time I was very young, Chris, if you're going to be happy, if you're going to make other people happy, you have to be happy with yourself. That's always stayed with me, because if you're not happy, you're not going to love what you're doing. And if you're not loving what you're doing, people are not going to love what you're doing. So with Chris, he was really excited about Localis when I pitched the idea. And then once we started getting into the actual finances and, getting to opening the place, I very soon realized that what he wanted and what I wanted were two totally different things.
Yep.
I was not willing to waver on what I wanted, because Localis is my idea, and I say that with kind of like a little bit of mine, right. Because when you work at something so hard and you have it in your head for so many years, you're not really willing to waver on too much. And I knew that Sacramento was ready for Localis. There was no question in my mind that we have plenty enough adventurous eaters, people that love dining, people that love finer foods. And I think he grossly underestimated Sacramento. I think that, believe me, I know about Sacramento's desires for burgers and beer and bacon and all those great things. But I also think that we're just waiting to find who we are as a city. And I think that we have plenty of people that love to eat really nice food and love to see beautiful ingredients processed by people that care. And I knew that was going to work. So early on, when it wasn't working, I will tell you that it was the hardest year of my life, opening this place and staying open under the previous ownership. I never felt good about myself. The energy in this restaurant was terrible. We had, zero help. We were just kind of floundering over here, trying to do what we could with what we had. And, a lot of other stories that I don't need to go into. But bottom line was, when it came time to, close the restaurant or for me to buy it or whatever else, I tried to buy it earlier and it wasn't going to happen. And I think at a certain point it reached a spot where he just had to get out or do something different with the space. Mm-hmm. And at that point in time, I found that I was able to make it happen. And the second I took over, the energy in this place changed. We had already made, very, very good splash in the media for good food and for different concept and for just being, a different kind of style. And I think that helped us. But when I took over, we saw the most crazy increase in business I've ever seen in any restaurant. This year versus last year is going to be, almost mind-blowing as far as how much better we're doing this year. And I think that's because the energy in here is now focused solely on where we're going. We don't care about where we've been. I don't talk bad about anybody from the past. Yeah. I'm focused solely on creating a work environment that every employee loves coming to work, because I think that's when you win. Once again, I can be as great as I can be, and I can come up with the most crazy dishes, and I can still cook all those dishes and blah, 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 blah. You could talk about me all day long. It's very easy for me to do that sometimes. Mm-hmm. But really, in my heart, what I want is a family, is people to come to this place and love it. I want them to want to come to work. I want them to want to work harder, because they make good money, because they feel like they're taken care of, because they feel like they're working for a greater purpose than just a paycheck. And I think that's where, my mentality about business and the previous ownership's mentality about business were vastly different. Mm-hmm. And that was more so than the food was, I want to offer this, and I think that we can do this, with that sort of concept.
Other than now you can make the choices that you want. You were an executive chef at multiple places before you took over here. So how did ownership change what you do?
Oh, man. I think I was very ignorant and very, I'm trying to find the word for it, but I had no idea that ownership would be as hard as it is. Yeah. I thought, hey, I've run plenty of restaurants. I know my numbers. That's one thing that I think a lot of chefs don't do is know their numbers. I can tell you what things cost. I can tell you how much labor I have on a day. I'm very good with the number side of it. But the management and the inability to ever have time for yourself. I never have time for myself. And that's the part that I didn't see. Being an executive chef, yes, there's always someone bothering you or calling you, or, you need to put this order in, or you need to do that. But when you step into ownership, and not just owning, but owning and still being the executive chef, you've seen it today. How many people have been in those doors that needed me in the 1 hour we've been talking? It's incredible. And I'm so happy that I live 45 minutes away, because my drive home is the only 45 minutes throughout the entire day that I get to not have to be the chef and owner of Localis. It's just, and don't get me wrong, I'm so fortunate and I love what I do in this place, but it is really tough. And I wish that I would have known a little bit more about ownership before I got into that, because the places I worked before as executive chef, where there was just one owner, mom and pop place like Cafe Zorro, I didn't know that he had a family that was extremely wealthy and that they, opted to pay for an accountant and this and that and on and on and on. So really what he was doing was just maintaining numbers, like it wasn't like he was running the business and had to do everything himself. He was just taking care of the business, and I was taking care of the kitchen, as well as the labor cost, the food cost, all that stuff was my responsibility. So yeah, ownership has been.
You realize if your dreams come true, you're going to have even less time for yourself. So are you ready for that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I've never shied away from. I'll go back to the work ethic thing. I think I was born and bred that way. I know exactly what it takes to become a Michelin chef. I know exactly what it takes to own a business now. And my family has adjusted. I still spend time with my children. In the mornings, I get them up, I, feed them breakfast, we hang out, we do something, and then I take them to wherever they're going to go for the day. On Mondays, my work-life balance, really for me, what's happened is I've transitioned from trying to spend as much time as possible with the kids to making sure that when I do spend time with my kids and family, that it's dedicated solely to them. I don't answer my phone. I don't play on my phone. I don't play on a computer. We don't watch TV unless we're watching a movie together. I spend my time dedicated to my family when I'm not here. And that being said, my wife is slowly transitioning into being able to work here with me. So we get to see each other a little bit more, which is really nice. My boys come down here often and play in the restaurant before anyone's here. And as a restaurant owner, and I definitely don't want to get all tied up with like tears and stuff on camera, but just seeing them like run around and play in the restaurant and know that like I don't have to worry about an owner coming in and being like, hey, your kids aren't welcome here, or you can't have your kids here. I get to hang out with them, and sometimes I give them little projects, like here, peel these, or I give them strawberries to like do something with, knowing that they're probably just going to eat them all, but it's really fun to watch the transition. Being an owner, some of the great things are being able to do those things, being able to have my family come in and hang out at the restaurant, or get my kids to be able to try all the cool stuff and the great ingredients that we bring in here. I take some of those home, and they're eating the freshest of everything, which I think is super important too. So
I asked Pure Chocolate this question too, so I think you heard this question before, but do you want this lifestyle for them? Like most chefs that I talk to, they're kind of like, I don't know if I necessarily want this lifestyle.
Yeah. I look at it, I don't want to get too philosophical about it, but I think that my daughter, I'm very, very anti-religious. That does not mean that I worship Satan, because that's a religion too. It's just solely based on I don't appreciate a lot of, the aspects of religion. But my daughter wanted to go hang out with a friend and go check out this church, this Catholic church thing. So I took her to that. And she wanted to check out this Christian thing with some of her friends. So I took her to that too. Point being, my children will make their own decisions on where they want to go.
Yeah.
If they want to be a chef, then I will tell them, you have to work your ass off, and you have to try so much harder than everyone else is to make it in this career. There's a lot of people that have been cooking for 30 years that will still be cooking in another 10 years and never make it anywhere where they're owning a place or they're running a place. That I think is where you get caught into that, lifestyle where. And the other thing is, the heavy drinking and the heavy drug usage that goes along with this career. Yeah. When you have no time, the little time that you do have, you want to party, you want to hang loose, you want to cut loose. I'm not a big drinker. I love wine and I love beer. I'm not a very hard spirits kind of guy. I just don't drink very often. I never get drunk really. I don't do drugs. I mean, I smoke a lot of weed. I don't mind saying that on on record. But that's the only thing that keeps me from killing people sometimes. I don't do prescription drugs. I don't do any of that stuff. I've never been interested in it. I've always been focused on music, or focused on electrical work and getting a business, or focused on cooking, or focused on family, or focused on something that my focus, I can't take that away. So with my boys, I mean, would I love to pass them Localis one day, 20 years down the road when it's extremely successful, that it's not going to fail, and all someone has to do is work hard to keep it going? I would love to pass that off to one of my children one day. That being said, if they're like, hey, I never want to work in a restaurant, great. What do you want to do? And we'll try to support you as much as we can in that.
How much do you think about your staff's health, right? So to be a Michelin Star restaurant, not only do you have to be at your very best, but everybody in the restaurant has to be at their very best. So when you think about the lifestyle that this career often entails, how do you think about that in terms of?
Well, I think it's like, you have to treat them like family. You can't look at them as employees and say, hey, where most businesses say, I'm going to work you until the point where you literally can't work anymore, and I'm going to pay you the least amount of money to do that as possible. I look at it in a totally different way. I want everyone here to have a good work-life balance. It makes it hard on me sometimes. My sous chef, he works a lot. Don't get me wrong. He's 50 to 60 hours a week. But that being said, a lot of sous chefs are working 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week, and they're getting paid less than what he's getting paid. This restaurant, this business is not about me making tons of money. It's about the restaurant becoming super successful and well known, and that's the main goal beyond just the money. So I pay people better than most other restaurants pay people. I make sure that they're my line cooks don't work crazy extra hours. They work their normal shifts and they go home. So I try to offer the ability to have the dream of working in a restaurant that's a Michelin, even if we don't get a Michelin star, we're always working towards that goal of being at that level.
Yeah.
Right? I tell every cook, I tell every server, I tell everyone that works here, it doesn't matter if Michelin never comes here. It doesn't matter. We're going to continue working at that goal of being at that level. I know what they expect from a restaurant, and we can do that even if we don't have a Michelin star. Even if they're never going to come to Sacramento, it doesn't matter. And because I take care of my people and I try to be very fair and very honest, I think they react really well, and they work really freaking hard for me. I've never been prouder of a group of people in my entire life. And we've had some come in and some leave, of course, like any restaurant. But we've got a pretty solid core of people here that have been here for a good amount of time. And we've had people leave on the greatest terms, because I see when people are not wanting to be here anymore. And it's not about they don't like the space. Maybe they've learned everything they can learn. Maybe they've, got a different passion in their life. Maybe they don't want to do this anymore, whatever it is. We try to, make that work for them and leave on good terms. I once had to let a cook go because they just didn't work well with me. But instead of just saying, hey, you're fired, get out of here, I called around ahead of time. I found a really good spot for her to go. And I let her go that day. And I said, please walk down here and you have a job ready to go for you. I want people to know that this is always going to be for their betterment. I can't just have it be for my own. It has to be for them. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, I've reached my limit here, or I'm not comfortable here, obviously if I love that person and they're great, I'm going to try to do what I can to fix it. And if I can't fix it, then, spread your wings and fly. I did the same thing. I was very flighty as a cook, because if I wasn't happy, I was out. I'm like, I don't want to work somewhere where I'm unhappy. So I try to make this place happy as much as possible. I'm not perfect as an owner, as a manager, for sure. I have a very hard time dealing with specific personality traits. So I try to recognize that and work with it. But bottom line, to answer your question, and try not to be so freaking long-winded about it, is just the fact that I pay people well here. I do very cool things. We go to cool restaurants. We do company parties. We do dinners. We do chant before, every single shift that we open. I just try to make this place great to work at, because I think when people are happy, they're going to perform so much higher. I think it's been proven over the years that people that are happy and positive reinforcement, and that doesn't mean that I'm not scrutinizing everything that everybody does, because that's how you get to Michelin. But at the same time, you can do it with compassion and care and from a positive aspect, rather than just chewing people's asses every day and telling them they suck. That doesn't work for me. So I will continue. We offer AFLAC to our employees. It's small, but if a big accident happened, they would have something to rely on. If they cut their finger really bad and had to go to a medical thing, they'll get money for that. I can't afford to do benefits yet, but I will. I mean, my goal here is to have full benefits, paid vacation for everybody, not just executive sous chef, not just the people on salary, which there's only me and him, but for every employee. I'm going to try to work it out to where next year, when we take 5 days off for 4th of July, I want to give everyone a bonus. That's what they would make during that time. That's the focus of the restaurant. And I could not be more fortunate with the small group of investors that I have. They all believe in that as well. They're not going, hey, we want our checks. They're like, hey, pay yourself more. Hey, pay your employees more. Do this for them. We're going to do a wine thing for them. I mean, I'm so fortunate to have the group of people I have around me, that I just try to make sure that I make everyone else feel how I feel every day when I come here.
And to change the restaurant game, we need more of those investors, is the reality, right?
We need more of those investors.
Because it seems like every time a new restaurant opens and I look at their menu, I just put my head to the table and be like, okay, I've ate at 3 other places in this town that are exactly like that.
Exactly like that. I don't think that's so much investors. I think that's, I think it's the previous ownership of this place is in that same mentality that you have to do, something that pleases everybody, right? You have to create, every restaurant has to have something for every single person in Sacramento. Guess what? There's people that are never going to come to Localis.
Yeah.
Ever. We don't offer this. We don't offer that. I get it. And I'm sorry that they won't come here. But the fact of the matter is we have to keep our mission here. We have to keep focused, and we can't do something for everybody, because then you spread yourself thin. Quality goes down. You're going to have to drive your people harder and harder and harder, because you're making less money or less profit on what you're selling. So for me, I think it's investors that think like that. I think it's chefs that think like that. I think it's restaurateurs that think like that. We need to change the entire restaurant scene in the world, really. I mean, we have to come out of the dark ages of everyone works, an ungodly amount of hours, unpaid for most of them, no benefits, no bonuses, no anything, because it's all about greed. It's all about, restaurant profits are so small that you have to capture every little dime. But if I can live a good lifestyle and my investors can be paid back, eventually, and I can do whatever I can to get them paid back, and we can take care of our employees and make them feel like they're cared for, then it's a win-win for everybody. It's I think business for restaurants is always short term. We're so cash dry that everyone focuses on this week, this month. I'm focused on 10 years from now. I don't care about what's happening right now. It's like I want to set myself up for a future of consistency and growth. So I don't want to think about right now trying to open up that restaurant that okay, I got to pay the least amount for employees. I got to pay the least amount of ingredients. I got to pay everything the very least that I can so that I can make the most profit as I can. I'm more focused on making sure that this restaurant is as awesome as it can be first. And I think that in turn will create more revenue down the road.
Mm-hmm. What does it mean to you to be an entrepreneur living in Sacramento right now?
To be a what?
Entrepreneur living in Sacramento right now. These are the ending questions.
Entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't consider myself an entrepreneur yet. I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't have money to invest yet. I don't have what I think I need to have yet. One day I hope that this place is successful enough for me to say, hey, like my executive sous chef, Jesus Garcia, he probably wants to open up his place one day. I hope that I'm fortunate enough to have the money to invest in his business one day. That's what I want to do. I don't want to continually invest in myself. I want to give other people the opportunities that I've had given to me to open Localis. I want other people to have those opportunities. So what's it like to be an entrepreneur? I don't know. Ask one of the many people in town that, are opening place after place and being successful and being good. 'Cause I'm still just trying to make this one little spot work.
Well, I'll change the next question to you. What advice would you give aspiring chefs and cooks that are reading articles like Sacramento is the next Oakland or the next Portland, and that's the next hot spot to live? What advice would you give those folks before moving here?
Start working your ass off right now. Don't wait for it to be that. Work so hard every single day. I hate to say this, and there's times where I'm lazy too. Everyone has times where they're lazy, but too many people expect, everything around them to come up to the point where they get to do what they want to do. You have to be better than everyone else. There needs to be competitive between the restaurants. There needs to be competitiveness between cooks and chefs and everyone that's in this industry, in any industry, to constantly get better. This does not come easy. As far as becoming the next Portland, the next Oakland, I would pray. When I got back from my Oakland eating trip, because I go on trips just to eat around, just so I can get perspective on what other people are doing. And when I came back here, I was like, we have better weather. We're just as cool, and we have better produce. Like, we should be cooler than Portland. And I'm really excited that more people are moving into Sacramento. More people want that style of food like they have in Portland. So I would just say, don't stop working really hard. It's not easy. Like, I heard Ramon with Pure Chocolate, like what set him apart, what set other people apart. And he said he didn't go out and party after school. He didn't go out and do this after school. He worked every day. He worked on his knife skills. He worked on this. He worked on that. I was the same way. Like, I had bags of potatoes at my house just for working on knife skills, so I could get better. You have to have an intensity and drive towards things. Otherwise, you're just going to be like everyone else. I don't want to be like everyone else. It doesn't mean I want to be better. I just want to be different. I want to have a different thing. So I would say start working right now, and don't eat out, or don't not eat out. I think that's the biggest problem that I have in Sacramento is, like, chefs don't go out. Well, I don't have the time. I work too many hours. Like, I have 3 kids at home. I'm an owner of a business. I'm an executive chef. I'm a very, very, very busy person as well. But I make the time to go out and see what other people are doing in my town, in my state, in my country. It's important to get an outside perspective. And I would say do that. Spend the money. Don't go out drinking 2 nights in a row and spend $80. Save that $80 and go spend it on a tasting menu at Localis. Or go to Crew and do yourself up there, or go to some other, great restaurant and spend some money and enjoy your food and critique it and look at it. Be part of what you're going to be part of. If you're going to be a chef and you're going to be a cook, don't just worry about your restaurant. Worry about everything else around you. Because like I said, in order to get the recognition that we're going to need, everyone has to come together, be competitive with each other in a way that's benefiting everybody. I'm trying to be the best burger spot. I'm not going to do a burger like every other person. I'm going to do something different, something better, something this, something that. Push yourself.
Sacramento has been known as a cow town. It's been known as a government town. The word boring has been said before on this podcast. So when people think of the word Sacramento 20 years from now, what do you think people will think?
I wish I would have got in, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like that girl in high school, and this is not a specific girl, and it's not meant to be a sexist comment in any way, shape, or form. So I got to be really careful with what I say, but it's more so of just that translation of there's those, and I guess it's guys too. In high school, they weren't, what most people consider attractive, or they were nerdy, or they were this, or they were that, and people, didn't, care about them because they weren't, super popular or super beautiful or whatever else. And then you see them like 10 years later and they're, a model, they're this, they're that, they're super successful, they're, whatever, you look at as what you want in life, whether it's beauty or money or fame or whatever. They didn't have that. And then 10 years later, when all those people that were making fun of them now are like, oh my God, he's worth millions, like I want to be his friend. Well, you should have seen that good and that greatness in that person before. And now that they're gone and they've done this, I see Sacramento as the same thing in 20 years, to be honest, because I think we're on a huge trajectory. I think Sacramento is going to blow up. California is one of the most amazing places in the world to live, right? We have everything in California. It's nuts. Sacramento is the capital of California. So I think it's only a matter of time before, we're the capital of, the U.S. as far as like what's happening. And I think that paying attention and giving that love and consideration and I was a nerd in high school. I was a musician. I played Magic the Gathering. I was from Forest Hill. I was a weird kid. I had a lot of friends because I didn't care about cliques. I was friends with the skaters. I was friends with the stoners. I was friends with the jocks. Like, I didn't care. I was just friends with people. Give everyone the opportunity, and then later down the road when they do those successful things, they're going to remember who was nice to them. And I think Sacramento is the same way. They're extremely loyal. Sacramento is, once they trust you, they are crazy loyal, and it's such a cool group of people, and I'm so excited to be here.
Biggest fear in running the business?
That it goes out of business one day. That's the biggest fear. I mean, that we do something or something happens to where we can't stay open. That's the biggest fear. I mean, there's lots of little fears, but really the bottom line is if the place closes, that's it for me. So. Mm-hmm.
This is a two-pronged question. What can Sacramento do, if anything, to help your business? So either from a community perspective or a government/regulation perspective.
Well, I'll keep it basic to Sacramento because I start thinking about broad federal taxes and all that. But I mean, Sacramento as a community to help us here is be a little bit more open-minded about who we are, what we are. There's still a lot of people that are like, oh, it's too fancy, it's too this, it's too that. We're not. We're just trying to do the best food we can do. People that know us now, obviously we're successful, so I don't have to worry about, trying to change people's minds too much. But the people that haven't been here because of, something they heard or because of something they saw or because of a review they read or whatever else, you got to go into a place. You got to try it first. You can't just say, I don't like that place. How do you know? Mm-hmm. And the whole the presentation is way too fancy for me. It looks too expensive. Guess what? Close your eyes and eat then, because it's about food. It's about delicious food first. Everything else is secondary to what you're eating. So be more open-minded and don't be so scared to spend a little extra money on food. I mean, people will spend thousands of dollars on tattoos and computers and cell phones and all these meaningless things, throughout life, but they'll want the cheapest possible food. That's what you're putting in your body to live. You know?
The one marketing problem that you do have, and I don't think that this is necessarily a problem considering where you want to go, but every time I see your restaurant on Instagram, it's of the tasting menu, right? So I often myself forget that you have small plates and large plates.
Well, maybe you're looking at my personal thing?
No.
Because we don't post anything
really?
from the tasting menu on the Localis Instagram.
Oh, I'm not talking about you, but other people.
Other people. Oh, okay, yeah. Because I was about to say, we actually made a very, very conscious decision to not be posting too much of the tasting menu on the Localis Instagram because we don't want to scare people away. It's like... so we try to focus on, our main menu, the menu that, people can order whatever they want. But I think... I see where you're coming from. It's a problem because some people might look like, oh, that's all they do, right?
Yeah.
I see it as look at what people want from Localis. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very clear, we love the tasting menu. People love all the other dishes. Our octopus is very well known. Certain things have really kind of projected as this is what Localis is about. But from what I'm seeing around, people come here for the tasting menu because we're the only gig in town that's a tasting menu at a regular restaurant. There's other places that do only tasting menu, only one seating, whatever else. But we're the only gig in town, I think, right now that's doing a tasting menu available every night. You don't have to secure your spot ahead of time. You don't have to reserve a tasting menu ahead of time. You can walk in at 5:00 and order a tasting menu. So I think that that's something cool. It makes it way less stressful than having to plan for months in advance. I got to go here this night. I got to be here at this time.
Right.
So I think that the overwhelming response to the tasting menu kind of shows that, you're probably on the right path one day to say that this is what people really resonate with when it comes to Localis.
Mm-hmm. One lesson since you've either opened the doors or one lesson you've learned since taking ownership that you've learned that would have made your life easier if you knew that in the beginning?
Play the game. Restaurants are a lot about who you know, who you interact with, what events you go to. I was very against all of that when I first was a chef. I was like, I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't care about, if you know how to do this or if you know these people or if you know those, that doesn't matter to me. I'm just cooking food. That's all that matters to me. And playing the game doesn't necessarily mean a negative thing either. It's just, you have to understand that when you're a business owner, you can't say everything that's on your mind all the time. Otherwise, you're gonna have to deal with the consequences of that. So being smart and being conscious of what you're saying, what you're portraying, what you're doing is very important. So I think that's the one lesson that I learned was learn to be a little bit outside of your comfort zone when it comes to going out and being out and talking to people and talking to, if you say something wrong in an interview, it can react very badly with your customer base. If you take a picture of doing something really bad and it leaks out, that's going to be bad. If a politician wants to, talk your ear off for the entire night about all the things that he wants to do, there's part of me that says like, I don't care. And then there's part of me that's like, well, if he has a great experience and he loves it, he's going to go back and tell all of his, political friends that this is a cool restaurant, and then they're all going to come to the restaurant. And in the end, that's going to be good for business. So you just have to learn to kind of just, be a little bit more open to being, an owner and being a public figure. So
when prepping, do you ever blare your own music?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I was as far as like my band's music.
Yeah,
no, I'm not really into that. Like, I listen to death metal. Like just this last weekend, preparing for the 2-year anniversary dinner, I spent better part of like 30 hours in here by myself.
Yeah,
and I was playing death metal like a good half of that time, and then the other time playing really soothing, like calm stuff.
And that's the thing I was thinking about a lot when I was reading about you. It doesn't necessarily make sense to me that you're a death metal guy. Like your food is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't necessarily equate to death metal.
Yeah.
So.
That's the thing, I've always been an odd duck. I don't have any, I don't care about clothes. I don't care about, really what I drive. I mean, I love Subarus, so I'll continue driving Subarus, but I don't need to have a fancy car. I don't care about any of that stuff at all. I've never cared about what I wore, what I looked like as far as, my dress. I do art. Yeah. It comes in all ways, shapes, and forms. And I like the fact that I can say it's good or bad. I don't care if it's abstract art or like classical, Monet paintings, or if it's Chinese food or Thai food or a chili dog or, whatever it is. I only look at life as good or bad. There's no like critiques of, this kind of this or this kind of that. It's just good or bad. So I think with that comes, you see a death metal guy, there's been plenty of shots of me like at events with like a Gorgut shirt on, and it's like, I love that, because the old school death metal guys that know me from that era are just like, dude, you're doing like this fine dining, super fancy food.
Yeah.
And then you're like going home and, playing 250 beat a minute blast beats, it's just a cool thing. It's different. I just had a Decrepit Birth in the Kennedy Vale. They were going out on tour and I reached out and I was like, listen, I know you're all hanging out in Sac. Why don't you come in and let me feed you like a really nice dinner? Because I know that when you're on the road, you're going to be eating garbage the whole time. So I had them come in before service, and they stayed a little bit too late. And I just comped the whole thing out. I just wanted them to enjoy some food. And you should have seen some of the looks on our guests when they're looking at this table of like long hair, like tattoos, like just gnarly looking dudes. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, once again, part of being an owner, like that's a cool thing that I was able to do that. You wouldn't be able to do that if it was owned by somebody else. Like, so that kind of got me thinking I might put it out there to touring bands in general. Like,
right.
Come in and we'll hook you up. We know that you don't have a bunch of money. Let us, feed you something really good that makes you going to feel good when you go play that night or travel the next day or whatever. So it was fun.
We always end the show with this, which is one thing I find fascinating about the internet, is when something is on the internet, hypothetically, it's on the internet forever.
Yes.
So someone could be listening to this 20 years from now, including yourself or your family. So is there anything that you would like to say to yourself or your family 20 years from now?
Thank you for being, to my wife, for being so understanding and for letting me live my passion, my dream. To my children, I hope that you see that the focus, dedication, love, care that I put into the restaurant was not just for me. It's for them, to set them up with a great future, to where I can make money doing something I love that still benefits my family. And for me, in 20 years, hopefully I want to tell myself, like, good for you for not opening up, 100 restaurants and being engrossed by trying to make more money, and just having maybe a couple really cool restaurants that are really neat and different, and that people just love going to because they feel welcome there. So I guess the last thing in 20 years was I'll still be kicking myself in the ass for being an electrician for 10 years. I should have just been cooking that whole time, because I think that's probably where it's going to end with me. So,
Anything else that we did not talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I mean, I guess realistically, not a whole lot. I think you asked a lot of questions. I obviously talk a lot, so I get a lot out when I do interviews. Thank you for picking and choosing lots of different aspects of Sacramento to look at, not just restaurants. That's one thing I would like to see in Sacramento, is far more other things than restaurants, I think. And that's not because I'm afraid of too many restaurants opening up and I'm not going to make it. It's just about cultural diversity. And I think that we need to do a little bit more of that in Sacramento. There doesn't need to be, 80 restaurants in a 1 mile radius, let's branch out and do some other cool stuff here. Let's see some different things and try different stuff. But no, man, just appreciate your time and coming out and doing this with me.
Okay. And where can people find you?
At Localis. Every day, all day. Definitely the Instagram. I try to post stuff that's, pretty much my whole Instagram is family and food. That's all I really care about right now. Find me here. I'm going to be at the Bridge Dinner this year, being one of the executive chefs there, which is super cool. Really neat thing. And then, just here. Come in and say hi, drink a beer. I don't care if you spend any money. Just come in and drink a beer and hang out and talk with us. That's what we're here to do.
Well, I had a good time, and hopefully I won't say localis in the intro. So.
Localis, localis. It's endless. It's just Localis.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Cool, man. Thank you.